Hi, I'm Ken Fenyo, and welcome to this episode of the Retail Playbook. Today, we're going to have an exciting conversation about the customer experience and how to measure it and how to analyze whether or not you're really delivering the kind of performance that you want to do. Going to have my special guests from Uncrowd, the founders Richard Hammond and Rocky Howard, which we'll get to in just a minute. One of the reasons why I think this is such an interesting topic. So when I was at Kroger, we had a customer tracker. And the customer tracker was an important way we analyzed the customer performance. And so there were really four elements that we tracked. One was around people. Our people are great. One was around the products. We have the products you want plus a little. One was around a store experience. So the experience makes you want to come back. And lastly, one was around pricing. So pricing was good. And it was really something we really use extensively around the business, including to set bonuses for associates. So all the way up to Dave Dillon, who was the CEO, down to store associates. This was an important way that we were measuring ourselves. But the challenge with it was all survey based. And so, because it was survey based, we had problems of, was it representative, right? So at the time, a lot of it was done by phone surveys. Who really answers their phone these days? And you can do it online, but that has its own issues. One, two, I think the questions tended to be fairly general. So you might ask somebody, did you find the fresh selection good? Or did you find the quality good? And it was at that level. And lastly, it was hard to get to the store level. We would occasionally try to do things more in a geo or at a store level. But when you're doing surveys, getting enough sample to really know why is this store doing well or how is that store doing versus that store is really next to impossible. And I think what we're going to find, what Uncrowd has done, is really come up with that better mousetrap, a better way of measuring it consistently and with rigor that can really drive real benefits for stores and for retailers. So with that, why don't we jump in? Richard and Rocky, I'd love to just hear maybe a minute on your background and why did you decide to start Uncrowd?
Yeah, of course. And actually, you've just identified one of the reasons there in your introduction. I'm a retailer, so I go back now 39 years to starting in a retail environment. I've always been obsessed by one very straightforward idea, which is what is it that makes a customer of their own free will walk past or go past or not even open the browser window for my competitors? Why are they coming to me? I was obsessed by that as a 15-year-old, and I'm obsessed by it now, many decades later. And I've been a frustrated retailer because those tools that you just talked about, they really struggle to capture truth. And the reason for that is, and this is, a roundabout way of talking about why we started, is that feedback-based metrics are, by their very nature, human. And we are really not equipped to explain why we do the things we do. You think about that in your real life. We pay therapists tens of thousands of dollars to tell us why we make some of the crazy decisions we make. And then a brand comes in and says, what do you think of our fresh proposition? And we say whatever comes into our head. And then if we're asked a day later or in a different situation, we say something different. Some people, to get rid of the question, will say whatever comes to they'll make it up. And so those data sets are all full of accidental untruths and some deliberate untruths. But nobody, no retailer, no operator like me and you, Ken, we don't know which bits of the data has the truth in it or not. And so the entire data is junk. It's useless. And so that's been a question that was wrapping around my head for a long time. And I was lucky enough to write a number of books on retail, one of which, Smart Retail, was the world's best-selling retail how-to of all time, in fact, 22 languages, lovely. But in that, I tried to see if we could find a way of understanding our businesses using maths instead of opinion, using objective an appreciation of observable reality. And long story short, it turns out you can. The people who know you can is Rocky and I, because we spent the last 8 years working out how you do that, not realizing that nobody else had cracked this problem, incidentally, Ken. But anyway, initially I just wrote about it as an idea, and people started kind of bullying me about this idea that I'd published, saying, that looks like a data analytics platform. Why are you not doing that? And of course, I was perfectly happy being a consultant. There's a lot of easy money, frankly, in the consultancy game, Ken, as we all know, and picking and choosing projects all over the world, wonderful. But then Rocky here, and I'm going to, for our American audience, I'm going to call him Rocky, this idiot here. When Brits say that about each other, we mean it with love. But this idiot here persuaded me through a story that he'll tell that we ought to actually do this as a business.
Yeah, and I mean, thanks for the kind introduction there. But basically, my background has always been technical. It's always been in data and building systems for very big grown-up businesses like London Stock Exchange, Thomson Reuters, all those sort of guys. So when Richard told me they had this idea, and he was just finishing off a book that was describing this idea, he was sitting in Bulgaria, in Sofia, and it sounded like something I wanted to get my teeth stuck into. It sounded like something like one of my passions is making that sort of theory into something real and tangible. So I jumped on the plane and basically ambushed him in Sofia, of all places. And we sat down for 3 or 4 days, and basically I said, look, if this is going to work, then we're going to make it work. If it's not, then we'll leave it, and I'll leave you to your books and all that sort of stuff. So we spent 2 or 3 days outside of restaurants and bars with pads and pads of paper with database diagrams, goodness knows what, until we finally thought, no, do you know what? We've cracked this. This is something we can create. This is something that not only is, there was 2 main things we were looking for. We were looking for, can this theory of a new way of measuring this stuff, does it actually work? And big tick in the box, it did. But most importantly, is it scalable? Is it something that we could push out and we could basically use across the entire of the US and globally to be able to measure these things in a scalable way that doesn't just break? So there's no consultancy, there's no sort of human touch in the way of the scalability. And we found a way to do that. So basically we went away, built an MVP, and the story started then.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, you know what they say, all great things start in Sofia, Bulgaria.
Absolutely.
They do say that.
It's a little unknown. Actually, speaking on the international theme, I do want to have a halfway tongue-in-cheek question, but I am actually curious. So when I started at Kroger, we were working with dunnhumby USA. It's now 8451. And I started wondering why it seemed everyone in customer data analytics had a British accent. And I started wondering if there was something in the water or if Americans just hadn't figured out how to analyze things. But sort of curious, you're both obviously British. I'd be curious, why do you think so much of the analytics and some of this innovation around analytics has come out of the UK?
You know how in Hollywood, all the bad guys are British?
It's true.
That's why. Because when you start bringing really good, rigorous data to the table, you are the bad guy because you're telling the truth. And you can't help yourself from telling the truth. It's the reality. You can't dress it up as a consultant would do. You can't dress it up as a traditional insight might. You can't cherry pick the feedback that best suits the thing that the CEO wants to hear. We're the British bad guys in the room saying, yeah, okay, unfortunately, the thing you think is fantastic, here's the 3 problems with it. But good news, we also have got the answers to those 3 problems. But actually, part of that is the reality that you were talking about from Kroger. 3 people in particular, Simon Hay, Millen Madahaven, and Stuart Aitken, came over with dunnhumby to Cincinnati. And, as they would say, with kind of a sleeping bag under one arm and $10 in the other hand, and they set up this extraordinary gamble for Kroger to say, look, we can take all this extraordinary data, use our very effective efficiency of analytics. And that was really the breakthrough. And they did the extraordinary job that meant that, particularly in grocery, there is a pioneering spirit that dunnhumby, and particularly Simon Millen and Stuart, pioneered, that meant that we were able to essentially, as an industry in the UK, already come into the US with that calling card, with that's mark of kind of effectiveness. And that isn't the case in many other areas of retail. America is an incredible hotbed of talent, a massive country full of brilliantly educated elite people who can solve, frankly, America can solve pretty much any problem it wants to. And it could solve the data problem as well if it wanted to. It just so happens that this brilliant UK organisation got there first, and that inspired a bunch of other people to trust that others from the same pool, like us, could come up with the same answers.
And also, neither of us have got the face for Hollywood, so retail's where it's at.
I will say, I do think Kroger really immensely benefited from the infusion of talent that came with dunnhumby in the UK, particularly as I think dunnhumby had done so many interesting things with Tesco, which itself was a really innovative retailer, tried new things. And I will say, and it'll be a bit off topic, we'll maybe come back to it later, is I think that ability to really think about the customer in a new way and use data to get there really was why Kroger had such a strong growth for, really a long time, really building on that in a way that other grocers and retailers in the U.S., were not. And it was a huge driver, I think, of their success for quite a while.
I think there's a reason for that as well, Ken, is that Kroger has a national outlook, whereas so many brilliant grocery businesses in the US are much more regional. When you have that national outlook, you have far more things trying to eat your lunch. You have far more sharks trying to pluck you out of the water, and I think that sharpens the mind. I think that means that people like Kroger and Walmart, and in the past Target, and that's a story that we won't probably get onto today, but what a damn shame that is. But that national outlook, I think, is really helpful. And one of the trends that we might touch on later on is we're seeing some of those brilliant regional grocers now start to fish in the national pool for their outlook. And that's really changing things. When you see Maya, for example, fabulous regional grocer who are top of so many metrics that Kroger and Walmart would prefer to be top of. Wegmans nailing a proposition, HEB, Publix, although Publix now are potentially the next national grocer. That's another trend that we might touch on. They could absolutely spread that offer beyond there. But I think it's because, and you were part of Kroger, of course, Ken, so this is indirectly praise for yourself, but Kroger was an engine of that national perspective.
Yeah, no, totally agree. All right, let's switch gears. I'd love to maybe hear just a bit more about your product. Like, what is it that you set out to do? How does it work? How do you get your data? Maybe just lay the land, and then we can dive in a bit more into some specifics.
So you've had founders on the show before, and the problem with founders is, for us, our product and our company is our baby. And as all parents know, you think every single part of that baby is beautiful. So, you want people to look at your baby's little toes because aren't they lovely? And your friends whose baby that isn't will all say, I don't care about its toes. Just, is it healthy? Is it all right? What is it? Is it a boy or a girl? I don't really care about anything else. So for founders, they're the worst people to explain what they do. And it took us a long time to get to the point of understanding what we do. And Rock will talk about the mechanics of it in a moment. But at the very top level, I was talking to a friend the other day about the problems that we solve for retailers. And what we do is we observe retail environments at scale. We do it on a massive, massive scale, but we managed to do it cost effectively. And I was talking to him about this and saying, oh, yeah, we solve this and we solve that and we cover this and we cover that. And he stopped me and said, one word, truth. And I was a bit confused. Go on, what do you mean? He said, you solve the truth problem. And he said, it doesn't matter how close he is to his operators, to his marketers, to his traders, to his buyers. He said, it doesn't matter how close I am physically to the fleet. I really don't know the truth, the customer truth in my fleet across this business, but you do. And then he said, and the thing is, I don't even know how I rank really versus my competitors. I can visit 10 stores a week if I want, but I don't know the reality of my proposition versus my competitors, but you do. And he summed it up. He said, look, what Uncrowd do is you've cracked the truth problem. You've managed to crack the problem of identifying the customer truth in my stores relative to those customers' other opportunities to spend the same money, and you've done it at scale. And then he said, you want to know what problems that solves? All of them. There's not a single part of my business that doesn't run better on truth. So that's what we've solved, is the truth problem. And Rock will tell you how we do that.
So yes, I mean, there's a couple of key things that we've done over the years, and primarily what we've done is we've managed to deconstruct the entire experience of in-store and online, from the parking lot to the exit. And in doing that, we've managed to basically determine a couple of things. What observation, what things to observe in the customer experience in the store environment, where to observe them, when to observe them, and perhaps most importantly is then where and how do you then use that. So it's a case of when it comes to what to observe, we've used the whole chunk of retail experience plus an AI layer to work out exactly what elements of the experience is important, and we have thousands of those in our observation set. We then go and do that using a proprietary app that we've created in store, and people are asked to observe what the parts of that puzzle at the exact moments of the store where they see it. So it's the reality, it's the truth that Richard talks about. And when to observe it, we swarm stores across the whole of the US to basically gather these data points to build this picture that gives you a really accurate picture for both all competitors alike, what the experience is like from beginning to end. What that allows you to then do is to then use that in a more traditional way. We feed that through the algorithms and the AIs that we have that basically reconstruct that in a meaningful way that allow you to slice and dice the data and learn and interrogate it using APIs. And we've got a self-service SaaS platform and all that sort of stuff that allows you to really dig in. But it basically brings you the truth without any level of opinion, without any level of asking people what they think about things. It's all about finding the actual reality of the experience in store, being able to compare it to yourself and your competitors, and then being able to know exactly which levers to then push or pull to be able to know how to improve your performance versus everybody else.
And just to sort of round that out, we do all this covertly. We use 1 million Americans who are part of the field marketing industry, and those 1 million Americans are equipped with our app, and they make tiny little granular observations, 1,351 of them across US grocery. And we do it in other sectors as well. We do QSR, we do mainstream apparel. We're about to start doing financial services, and we'll start doing healthcare at some point as well. The AI point, though, is well worth picking up on. One of the things that we've come to realize and are now exploiting is AI really struggles to understand the physical world, but humans are able to pass the physical world intuitively. We know what the physical world is. We understand it. We're in it. Our data has cracked the truth, the reality of the physical world. And because it's based on rule sets, on an ability to attribute value to the elements within that experience, and because it has heuristics and all sorts of things in there, it is uniquely placed to generate the most extraordinary training data for AIs that are then able to say for themselves, this is the value in this experience. This is the part of this experience that needs attention. This is the part of the experience that can be improved. This is how that AI then understands how to improve that experience and so on. And I mean, for that reason, we've got a whole bunch of AI businesses at the moment making acquisition noises around us, which has been a bit of a surprise to us. It would have been a surprise to us 2 years ago, but now it's so clear that that's what this data is capable of doing.
Well, certainly cracking the AI code, the store level, the physical world data is a huge asset, right? Because I do agree with you. AI is much better with in the digital world than in the physical world. But let me just maybe for a minute, I'm going to throw out a few and feel free to add because I want to make sure there's context for the data you're getting. But it's everything from were there carts available? Were the carts clean? Did they roll smoothly? If I went to a shelf where was if I go back to the dairy case, was it clean? Was the items that I wanted to buy there? If there was a promotion, was it easy to see? And was I able to recognize it? Or maybe give a few more of I'm just trying to give a flavor for the breadth of the things the data points you're actually collecting.
There's a couple of really good examples in there. So we would never ask a question like, was it easy to understand or was it clean? We'll always capture the specific data that says what's going on. So for example, with the carts, we don't ask, is the cart clean or not clean? We ask, can you see any of the following? And at what level can you see the following? So we ask for rust. We ask for debris. We ask for food juices, which is pretty grim, but we ask it. When it comes to understanding promotional clarity, for example, that's one of the most important aspects of a retail experience, and I'll get onto that in the data set. But for promotional clarity, we don't ask, was it easy to understand this promotion? We ask, how many types of promotions can you see? How does the ticket, the shelf label, how does it distinguish the promotion? what ways is the promotion communicated? What types of promotion can you see? In what volume? How is that promotion communicated around that promotion? And what you can do from all those tiny little granular empirical bits of data is you can then build a much bigger picture that says, yes, in this environment, promotions here are clear, straightforward, and easy to redeem. Not because we've asked somebody if it's easy, but because the data tells you if it's easy or not. And that's critical. And a great real example, one of my favorites, is the bad apple conundrum, which is that apples are in many baskets in a grocery shop. And so it's a very high volume, a very common item. And it's very easy for our observers to count the number of bad apples they see on display. Simple as that. And so we ask them to do that. We also ask them to pace the entire fresh produce area so we know what is the incidence of bad apples and how big is that produce area. So we can tell what the incidence should be for a given size of produce area. And then what we do is we're able to take that incidence of bad apples, literally just the apples that have got cuts, bruises, damage on them. We can use that to then say, hey, look, across your entire fleet, you have exactly the same number of bad apples on display as everybody else in your marketplace. So don't worry about it. Or, and this is more common, we find in your fleet, most of your stores are doing okay. But there's this cluster around, I know there was one that we spotted for a retailer recently around Atlanta. There was a cluster, it was northeast Atlanta and off into just the nearest towns, I think Athens, Georgia, places like that, where there was a much higher incidence of bad apples. And what we're able to do from that is say, we think there might be a distribution center problem. So go and explain. And there was. And if it's across one region, then that region has different standards. If it's across, one supplier, then you need to go to that supplier and say, hey, you're letting us down. But most importantly, we also give that customer of ours the data for their competitors on numbers of bad apples because we capture the entire set in Syndicate. And from that, you're able to say, actually, even though there's no clusters of bad apples in your store fleet, you're overall below the standard elsewhere. And when execs see that, it's an incredible moment. There's a tendency amongst human beings to concentrate on the really bad news. So let's say you've got a bunch of metrics that are all 0 to 10. Human nature is we're going to go and tackle the 2s, 3s, and 4s first because they look like disasters. And we might look at the 8s and 9s and say, do you know what? I want a 10, but I'll do with I've only got so many hands. I've only got so much time. I've only got so much money. So I'll concentrate on the 3s and 4s. But if your 8 out of 10 is Walmart's 9 out of 10, that's the priority. If it's an element of the experience that's important to customers, that's where. And we were presenting to a friend of ours now, actually one of your old colleagues, and we were scrolling through, and he was doing exactly what we said there. He was getting upset about the 4s and the 3s and thinking about what he could do. And we scrolled past an 8 until we showed him Walmart's number for that particular aspect. It was an aspect of pharmacy. And he said, scroll back up. Oh gosh, I need a team on that. I can't be half a mark down on Walmart for that. Oh my goodness. And then it's not just an 8 out of 10. He then said, okay, well, now I'm going to go straight to bargaining. I don't believe that 8 out of 10. Can you show? And because the way our data is structured, you click on it and then it shows you the signals that have told you that number. Then in each signal you click again and it tells you the specific observation frequencies that have given you that score. I kid you not, within 10 minutes between us, we had a project team set up to go tackle that 8 out of 10 that he didn't even know was a problem the morning before we met. And that guy's a brilliant operator. I think he's one of the best in our industry. But he didn't know what he didn't know.
Yeah, no, that's, a few thoughts. I love that example because I do think, that it's hard when you're an operator to really get at that granular level of detail. As I was sort of saying, the old tracker for Kroger was valuable, but ultimately it was a bunch of survey data. And it was like I explained it, right? How do you see the promotional price versus the actual data that drives whether or not you're doing a good job at that element? The bad apples is a great one. A survey question would be something like, did you like the produce selection or something like that, right? Versus there were actually, I could see 5 bad apples out of a set of them, right? And I think that granularity is actionable versus, yeah, it looked good, it was fine, right? It was fine. That's a human answer, right? Yeah, that was fine. What do you
Yeah.
do with that was fine? You know.
Who answers those surveys? I have a lot of respect for people who run panels, and that is an element of market research that's been perfected and honed over millennia. But you know what? People who respond to our requests for feedback are often just not the people we need to tell us. They're often the squeaky wheel. In the UK, they're usually the unhappy customers. Happy customers in the UK don't say anything. In America, we've tended to see a little bit of the opposite, that we will shout loudly about bad service. And it's a self-selecting group of customers that do not represent the people who need to shop in. So for me as a retailer, I can't trust fallible human memory and recall to make multi-million-dollar decisions against. One of our customers is thinking about, he competes against Target. Not against Target, against Publix. And Publix is becoming a big threat to this particular friend of ours. And one of the questions he's asking himself is, can he afford to put dollars on the labor model every day to try and match what Publix are clearly doing? And our data has shown that the labor model at Publix is far superior to almost anybody else's. Now, to do that in the past, he had no empirical data to take to the board to say, I need $200 million on the labor model because that investment will lead to this change in my financial performance. There was no data that could do it until our data arrived, because our data is intrinsically linked to financial performance. We've got a long history showing exactly what that correlation looks like. So he was finally able to say, actually, not only can I afford to add those hours to the labor model, I know exactly where to put them. So I can invest those labor hours in these three areas of my associate engagement, and they'll make the biggest difference. And you know what? He's done that, and it has. And that's the critical thing about truth is, we've all done this in our retail careers. We've all based a decision on a set of customer feedback that looked like it had credibility. Deeply researched, tens of thousands of people. I spent $100,000 on it, whatever it might be, and the change we've made hasn't worked. Well, there are two things that happen then. The first thing is the person doesn't lose their job for having made that change because the data said it should have worked.
Mm-hmm.
But the second thing that happens is you've still lost dollars. And we've accepted that for decades in retail. We've accepted that feedback will tell us something instructional about the direction in which we take our business. And we know this, all of us, it just doesn't do that. So you need truth. You need observed reality in order to be able to make good decisions.
Yeah, I love the labor one. I've intuitively always thought that, companies focus a lot on the cost of labor, but don't miss the opportunity of adding labor and adding service. I certainly faced that when I was at Grabango, which is company I was recently at, was in the checkout free space, and was always like, well, we can reduce front end labor. I'm like, well, that's great. But personally for me, I'd reinvest that in the experience, which I think we'll get to in a bit. Yeah. Before we turn, I want to get to some of the specific data. I know you have some slides to share on it, but before we get there, maybe this is a question for Rocky, but given that you're collecting all these data points, you went through them, I think you mentioned 1,000, how do you do that efficiently? Because obviously you don't want to have somebody taking 7 hours to collect all this data. So I'm curious how you actually capture that. And then maybe we'll turn to the slides and can jump in a bit of like, what's the results look like?
Yeah, that's where the tech comes in to help. Thankfully, is that the collection app that we've created, and the way that we structure the micro observations. It's not there's no sort of time wasting as far as, because we're not taking opinion. We don't need to take verbatim. We don't need people to write stuff down. We don't need to remember anything. It's basically a decision tree based process of walking around the store and just observing parts as you go. So it's a very logical flow to it. And you'd be surprised how quickly you can get through and accurately a store environment, even the size of a Walmart. You can tend to each of our visits tend to be in the realms of 45 minutes. 45 minutes is pretty much the limit of how much you can basically collect data. Anything more than that, it starts getting a little bit sort of blurry, because there's only so much you can do at once. But the way that it's structured in the tech, basically, the way that the questions are carefully ordered, the observations are presented to the person, and the way you flow through the store means that you can do it really efficiently. And it's surprised us that over the years, as we've developed this more and more, just how much information we can gather in this way, because traditionally, obviously, with mystery shops, they tend to be a very focused lens on, okay, go and look at the dairy. We've only got time to ask you 20 questions on the dairy, and because we can take us so much effort to work out what you actually meant, and what does it actually mean. We've got to decode what the opinions were. We're able to bust that apart and just say, look, you can have. We measure things as part of that 1,000 or so observations that we'll probably never use. They're parts of the experience that exist as something that a customer will experience as part of walking through a store. So why not measure it? Because we can do it so efficiently. We measure so much stuff that we've barely scratched the surface of. And it's only getting more efficient the more and more that we're bringing in some more sort of AI models and all that various stuff, as everybody is. But
there's a great example of that things we might not use one, isn't there, Rob? We gather aisle height and width because it exists, and we never thought you'd need that until a guy at one of our biggest customers said, "Oh, if I want to get aisle widths and heights," because he was working on a project on clutter and obstruction. He said, "I've got to go to property and I've got to get them to analyse all the plans for all the stores." And I said, "Oh no, hang on, we've got it, and we've all got it. We've got it for your 5 closest competitors too." And we were able to show him in 3 button clicks how his aisle width and height compared with everybody else. And that was a good example of something we didn't know that would ever be useful, but it turns out it was incredibly useful for somebody who was trying to work out whether they were making it easy for people to walk up and down the store.
Yeah, I mean, and one area, a little glimpse of the future is that we're also, as because we have presence in the store, we're also collecting. We're looking at using video as well, and collecting some stuff ambiently as they walk through the store. So there's a whole bunch of these observations that don't even need to be answered, other than physically walking through a space covertly.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. Oh, why don't we switch gears a little bit? So you guys are doing all this work, gathering all this data on experience. So maybe before we jump into some of the specific output, what I really love to be interesting is, like, what do you think drives experience? Because I know historically it was always like, well, fresh is the big thing for grocers. And curious, like, with all these data points and with the AI you use to pull up, what do you think drives a great customer experience?
Yeah, it's a brilliant question, but not least because the word "think" is the interesting part of that. As a in my previous life as a retail expert, solving problems, creating new formats, all those sorts of things, I would have opinions. I'd have thoughts on these things, and the number of times my own data now tells me I'm wrong is humbling, but also very useful, because it doesn't matter who has the right answer at the end of the day, as long as somebody has the right answer. And actually, our data tends to be the place that has the right answer. So, for example, there is an obsession amongst American grocers with the idea of friendly associates, with a smile and a wave and all those sorts of things. It's just not as important to the vast majority of customers as we really think it is. And that's not my opinion. That is the empirical truth in the data. When we take all of those possible interactions between associates and customers, and all of the interactions with products, and all of the interactions with services and facilities and availability and price and promotion and friction and pharmacy, when we take all of those pieces and we run our AI models, which essentially map real synthetic customers over the top of that data. So what is a customer trying to do? What mindset are they in when they're trying to do it? And what are the things that are important to them? And that's all very knowable. When you do that and you overlay it, associate engagement is pretty much, I think it's 4th out of the top 7 drivers of a customer's likelihood to spend more often, to spend more, and to give you a greater share of their household budget. Those are the only 3 things that matter. And that's, again, one of the things we get wrong so often is we assume that actually our customers are this loyal group of people who will, if we do well, they'll stay with us. And if we don't do so well, we'll say sorry and we'll get it better. Not a bit of it. Customers are getting their meat from Aldi. They're getting their store-covered basics from Walmart. They're going for the treats to H-E-B and Hy-Vee. They're going, they're shopping where it suits them across a bunch of options. And in a market where there is so much square footage, like North America, the customer's opportunity to be promiscuous is gigantic. There is a reason why 852 Walmart supercenters have an Aldi in their parking lot. It's because Aldi have worked out how to poach key customer missions from that Walmart. Top up. Nobody wants to walk to the back of a Walmart to get a quart of milk. You've been gone 3 days and your family have called the cops to declare you missing, and you've just gone in for bread and milk. Nobody actually wants to shop tonight's meal in Walmart when they can go into the Aldi in the parking lot, pick up a protein, a side, a dessert, and a couple of vegetables, and be out in seconds. And Aldi know that and have built the proposition to, when you see the numbers in a second on clutter and obstruction, for example, Aldi is the cleanest, easiest space in US grocery to move through. And Publix is up there as well, but it's pretty damn close. So it's very easy to say strategically, look, fresh, people, abundance, those are the things that we need to concentrate on, because they seem right, don't they, Ken? They seem to feel right. Actually, the number one is still, as it always has been, is on-shelf availability, real on-shelf availability. Not have I delivered stuff to the store, it is it on the shelf, and also does it look to customers, real people, like the shelves are full or not? That data is it's not the same as a spreadsheet tells me I've got I've got 50 boxes of Chex Mix in bold flavor. It's, are they in a bay that is 3 Chex boxes wide and 2 of those are empty because all 50 are in one row? The customer still sees 2 things out of stock. They don't see they can still get Chex Mix. They see that there are 2 things they could have bought that aren't there. So availability is still critical, and there's so much headroom still to get that better. The next is value projection. That's not just price. That is, how well does this store communicate to me that I'm going to do well in my pocketbook from shopping here? Now, we all know intrinsically that Aldi and Walmart are going to be really low price for us, but Giant Eagle, for example, are very good at communicating that they are a great value, not least because some of their prices are anchored by ridiculous prices that they've charged previously. But they understand how the human brain works. The human observation of value is the difference between A and B great enough for me to Publix, with their buy one, get one dominance. Publix are very expensive overall. But a customer of Publix will tell you, I get free stuff from Publix. I walk out there with my cart out to my car in the parking lot, and I've got free stuff. I've beaten the system. I'm clever. That's how the human brain works. It doesn't say I've spent £14, whatever it might be. And then the third after that is promotional clarity. It's all very well having great promotions, but and this actually happened the other day with a customer of ours, my marketing customer, she got a calculator out as we were walking her store to try and work out what the deal was on a particular item in grocery. And I just said to her, look, I'm not even going to capture the data here. Just talk me through what you've just done. And then let's measure the rest of your promotional clarity through this store, because that's nuts. Nobody's getting into that. So promotional clarity is more important than your fresh proposition. It's more important than the next one along, which is associate engagement. The sixth measure that's most critical is friction, essentially. How hard do I make it for somebody to spend money with me? And the seventh is interesting because this is dynamic. This isn't us taking a view. This is generated by the data set itself. So overlaying the customer, working out what customers need from these environments, that generates the data sets that are most important. The seventh is pharmacy. And if we were talking a year ago, it wasn't pharmacy. But the problems that CVS and Walgreens and Rite Aid and so on have meant that the grocers have been turned to by customers as a better alternative, and some of those grocers have really stepped up their game and have really done well in exploiting that. Some that you perhaps don't expect. One of the best pharmacies overreacted is Meijer. Meijer have done a super. I talk about Meijer a lot. I really respect the Meijer people. They're a very talented team who are doing great things, and I would urge any grocer in the US right now to go and take a trip up to Michigan. Maybe don't do it in the winter when I was there this year and in a rear-wheel drive truck and just about to go off the road in a lake storm. But go when it's sunny. But go up and visit those Meijer stores, and you'll see excellence in our industry.
That's great. Why don't I know you have some slides. I'd love to see maybe some of the output, share some with our audience. It'd be interesting to see.
Let's do exactly that.
It's interesting. While you're pulling that up, it's always been interesting how much the customer psychology you underplay, right? How people perceive things, and what does a yellow tag mean to them, and it's very interesting how that goes. And I think your data is getting right at some of those drivers. But why don't go ahead and turn it over to you.
And perception data is, there are really clever people in our research industry who are doing great things with accurately understanding perception. And perception is really useful. It's one of the inputs that we use to attribute value to individual parts of an experience. But there is we measure 1,351 different moments in store and outside store as well. But of those, we use all of our algorithms, our AI, and our systems to understand which are the most important data sets. And we call that Net Experience Score, NES. And so it's this mass observed data, the whole customer experience, but it pulls out single scores that are easy to action against, because what you're looking for is the scores that are below or above the average, above par, and their relationship to dollar performance, so you can then do something about those things. Something we didn't anticipate, incidentally, is it's also highly predictive of future revenue performance, to the point where there are now elite advisory banks in Wall Street who are using our data to predict movements in stock price, and very accurately too. We beat Wall Street, for example, recently on understanding what the comps would be at one of the biggest grocers on the planet. Our number was right, Wall Street's was wrong. So it's interesting how tightly this correlates with the dollars. Anyway, at the moment, the 7 leading data sets are the ones I just described there: availability, value projection, promotional clarity, fresh as a proposition, associate engagement, clutter, pharmacy. But you can think about that in much more simple terms. And when you think about it in simple terms, all of a sudden this makes more logical sense to us, doesn't it? Is it there for me to buy? Does the store offer me good value? Can I understand and redeem those promotions? Is this a good place to get my fresh food and build meals for me and the family? Are associates there? Are they available? Does the clutter make it harder for me to shop? And actually, do I trust this place to look after my health? Those things are basic human impetuses, and our maths surface the reality. Obviously, people can stop the video when they want to and look at things like the weightings and the par scores. That's worth doing, because you'll see that with a weighting of 41, availability is dominant, and associate engagement only has a weighting of 18.3, and that's reflective of its real impact on the likelihood of a customer to spend more, visit more often, give this retailer more of their money. And what I thought I'd do, having introduced that, is just show a few of the real numbers in the marketplace. Deliberately, this is only up to Q1 of this year, because some of these people are our customers. So we respect their data by not showing the current numbers. But it's okay to show what we call dead data, expired data, but it's still very indicative. So just a selection: Kroger, Walmart, Meijer, Aldi, Target, and Giant Eagle. And you'll see already such a mix of performance across there. Kroger availability, fantastic. They're only really beaten elsewhere by H-E-B, do slightly better than that, and Publix are always there or thereabouts. Obviously, Walmart and Aldi are known for low pricing, and low pricing, real prices, are part of value projection. But value projection is also, as somebody in the store, as a customer, can I see the difference between good and bad prices? Can I see the gaps? What are you telling me about how much I'm saving? And that saving bit is important, because, I mentioned Giant Eagle scoring third there. Giant Eagle are really good at showing great savings. And actually, Walmart, if it wasn't for Walmart's really good prices, Walmart wouldn't score so well. And they don't score so well in promotional clarity because, of course, they famously don't promote in the way that we would normally talk about it. We think that holds them back. And we told them that in June at their investor conference. Walmart needs to get better at actually telling customers they're cheaper. It's not good enough just to have great prices. You have to be very explicit and use that promotional clarity to make it clear, and the value projection to make it clear that I, as an individual person, I'm clever for shopping here. I'm doing a good thing. And that thing I mentioned about Publix and buy one, get one, Publix are allowing the customer knows they're spending more at Publix overall, but they're allowing that customer psychologically to not feel not feel duped, to not feel ripped off. That customer's walked out going, I get great produce, great goods, wonderful own brand, and at the same time, I'm getting free stuff in my cart and in the trunk of my car. That's amazing. And then, fresh, I talked about my really needs a trip. Associate engagement, the only people who beat the associate engagement numbers there, again, are Publix, HEB, Hy-Vee are right up there as well. They do brilliantly. And of course, you've got a number like that with Kroger. Different parts of the Kroger network score higher. Harris Teeter, for example, if you just look at the Harris Teeter division, fabulous, really high up on associate engagement. And actually, Harris Teeter is another retailer that I'm very fond of. I think they do a superb business in this industry, particularly where they're using shared systems. And then this matter of clutter, just to give you an example with those clutter numbers, you've got Walmart there with a relatively low number of 75. Although that's still above par, the reason Walmart is not scoring as highly as Meijer and Kroger is because Walmart haven't quite cracked how to do replenishment and online orders without physically getting in the way of the customer. And now that's not our opinion. That's what our data proves in those aisles, is that they're too often blocking access to product by being in the way when they're doing replenishment. So but that's only one part of that clutter measure. Clutter also measures, are things in the right place? Are the right prices on the right products? Is there things on the floor that shouldn't be there? Does the ticketing system get in the way of being able to see what I can buy? And so on and so on. Are the systems that things are presented on, are they clear and easy to understand? Is the ticketing communicating properly? Can I find my way around in a straightforward way? Is it logical? All those things are beneath that clutter measure. So, for example, if I was target there and I wanted to improve that number, I wouldn't then just have to work out what my clutter issue was. I dig down beneath it, few clicks, and it'll tell me exactly what my clutter issue is. And I mentioned Meijer on pharmacy, just fantastic. But I want to just bring this back to what this actually means in terms of the only thing that counts in retail, which is, does this data help me put more dollars into the cash register more often? And it does. And this is why this is so important, and why I would urge any retailer, whether through us or not, I don't really mind, but you've got to understand this data across those 7 data sets and across you and your competitors. I've redacted all the numbers here. This is a real group of 40 of our customers' stores in one part of our customers' network. Underneath those coloured blocks are the real data on average basket sizes, weekly sales, average sales per square foot, wages as a percentage of revenue, and so on. The first column is their Uncrowd net experience score. And just look at that. The higher up you are on that list, the more likely you are to have green blocks all the way across. The lower you are on that score, the more likely you are to have red blocks across there. And also, when you look at it over time, if my number is going down, but I'm still above in that green zone, I can see what that's worth to me. And incidentally, the average for getting these yellows and reds up to the midpoint of the green there across a big grocery store is $200,000 a month. So that data is just critical to understand what I'm actually putting through the tills.
Yeah, no, I think this is it's super interesting. I mean, I think a few things that really sparked to mind. One is just how many things have to go into a great experience, right? Yeah. It's so many different levers across, you have 7 categories, but I know below them there's a lot of even more detail under each of those, and how many things have to come together, and how operationally intense that is. At the same time, clearly there's huge value in doing it well and figuring out where you're weak and where you're strong, because financially it really drives performance.
Have you ever tried to change a habit, Ken? Have you ever tried as a human?
Not well, but yes.
The only times it ever works is not when we make New Year's resolutions and we say, I'm going to give up eating Cadbury's cream eggs. I'm not going to eat any more Cadbury's cream eggs. And as a British person, goodness me, that is a sacrifice. And it doesn't work. The Cadbury's cream eggs come out at Easter, and, we've not eaten Cadbury's cream eggs for 3 months because they weren't on the shelves. That's all. But when we instead divide up a change and we say, I'm just going to concentrate on the first, second thing that I can control this month. Next month, I'm going to concentrate on the third and the fourth. The month we do that with this data set, and every, it's critical as an operator that we do that. Not just our data, any data, any change. It's not about changing everything all at once. So this data is available at the store level. So an individual store can look at their 7 columns and say, I'm just going to tackle the top 3 in the first column first of all, and then when I've got those fixed, they're going to go away, and I'm going to tackle the top 3 in the second column next month. That leads to meaningful change over time. And then, of course, you also do that at regional, area level, at national level, and so on. And so it means that General Office can make strategic decisions with data sets like this to say, look, we can see that we are behind on the way we project abundance within our fresh proposition. Everybody else is doing it better than us. Stores can't control that, but we can. So we're going to spend some money on slightly improved, presentation equipment. We're going to add another couple of, whatever it might be. We're going to change the mix. We're going to do whatever. They can do that at national level. And so if everybody is making those 1 or 2, 3 or 4 changes over time across a 200, 300 store fleet, that becomes meaningful incredibly quickly. So there was one other bit of data that I was going to show before we finish up, which is, I just previewed it there, but one of the things that is a story in this marketplace is just how dramatically Walmart have improved the customer experience in supercenters. And, we all kind of look at that from afar with a mixture of envy and, professional curiosity. But one of the things that our data has shown over the last, I think it's 3 years, is just how extraordinary that rate of change has been at the same time as the rest of us not potentially moving our own needles. And I'll show you exactly what that looks like here, which is looking at that net experience score from Q1 2023 to pretty much now. Each of those lines is one of those data sets. So, the top green one there on the Walmart side is clutter, for example. And the bottom one is promotional clarity, I think. Oh, no, it's availability. The bottom one. Pharmacy. It's pharmacy. You can see that Walmart have produced meaningful change over time, whereas the rest of the market, with one major exception, that thick blue line that you can see firing up there, the rest of the market hasn't. And that tells us something which is really important, because all of these numbers are relative. So if you get an Uncrowd number that is 6 out of 10, it means that other 4 is achievable. So there's not some kind of guess at what a good score is. It's the best possible observation in this area can score 10, can score 100 out of 100. So if you're getting 90, you're getting 80, you have headroom. And it's all about headroom for retailers in this market. Forget us for a minute, forget Uncrowd. Look at just that promotional clarity number there. If we are only scoring 6 out of 10 on promotional clarity in US grocery, and at the same time, Walmart are able to improve their performance in that area significantly, we need to do something about that. We need to put our foot on the gas and look at what we can change. And the good thing about a data set like ours, the answers are in there. It tells you what you need to do to pull that up. And every customer of ours has at the moment in front of them documents that mine this data to provide a plan to make that change. And then the last thing I'd say from the data that we've just shown there is it's really important to remember that success is always relative. You're not in isolation. We think that way far too much as retailers. So you have to measure relatively, not by just staring inward. If you're not measuring relative to your competitors with the same data, which is critical, you can't just guess theirs and have yours. It's got to be the same data set, which again, we provide. If you're not doing that, you don't know if you're being successful or not. You just have no idea. You've got to focus on the right things, and that's produced by having that relative data. Of all of the things we worry about in retail, it's still availability. Still, the real on-shelf availability is what's critical. Value projection is more important than just price alone. We can't rip customers off, But if we get the mix of projecting our value along with our price, those two things together right, we can compete with Walmart and with Aldi. Why don't Walmart and Aldi have 100% of the grocery market if they're the cheapest? Because that's not how customers think. Because customers aren't thinking it's just price, it's just price, it's just price. All these other things that we've just shown are part of that equation for customers. It's an unthought, unspoken equation, but its value projection gives you the ability to compete with those guys. And at the end of all of that, if you're taking investment decisions on where to place your bets within a retail business, it's got to be based on where the real gains are going to be.
Yeah, that's amazing. One thing it strikes me, one of the sort of within this, I think the ability to get that, one thing that struck me is, you had like 2 million observations in the slide showing the, improvement of Walmart, which is amazing. But one thing that really struck me, one thing we did at Kroger was to focus on price. And that was probably for Kroger a huge gap versus Walmart, now would be against Aldi. And what we did is we created a program. We put the items that were bought most by our shoppers on a budget on a tight band of Walmart. And what it was we never got to be the best price, but we were good enough that people felt they could shop our stores and take advantage of all the other things we were really good at. So better produce selection, better variety, easier to shop, as you were saying, right? It's easier to get in and out. And so I think it is all about, I think the idea about it being relative is important because, we didn't need to be the cheapest price. We just need to be good enough that the other aspects we had of the experience that I think we did really well at were able to shine. And so I think keeping that in mind, what are you really good at? Were you most flagging your key competitors? And then how to really address that, I think is so important. I did want to flag, because we flagged it earlier, and maybe just for a minute, as I know we're running a bit short on time, but it struck me just how bad Target was on your list there. Oh. And it's been a retailer I used to shop and frustrates the heck out of me now when I go shop there. But that really shows just hopefully they get the right new person in and they can turn things around. But I guess they did already bring a new person. But man, they really are lagging there on those metrics.
So it pains me to show those numbers for Target, because I used to love Target. And back when I was a consultant, I used to use Target as a case study all the time of how you could drive a wedge in a marketplace to take money from, at the time, Walmart, the world's biggest company 25 years ago, for a short period. They accounted for 10% of the Chinese imports to the US, for example, went to Walmart. I mean, crazy numbers. But Target were able to compete successfully by still being great price, but not cheap at any cost. And that was always fascinating, because Sam Walton's philosophy at Walmart, everyday low pricing, meant, if you were a buyer at Walmart and you were going to go and buy a set of 6 tumblers to sell in the store, those 6 tumblers had to be the cheapest possible tumblers you could produce. No choice. Whereas the buyer at Target was able to say, okay, actually, the set of tumblers that are made for 10 cents a tumbler, they're not as even as each other. They're more likely to break. The glass is thinner. I'm not going to stock the tumblers that are 50 cents. Restoration Hardware can sell those. But the ones that are 12 cents, those are just a way better set of 6 tumblers. So I can buy those as the buyer at Target and have a better product that is still great low pricing versus the competition. And that was the glory of Target for so long. That's just gone. And at the same time, one of the products, so I'm in the US every month, but I still live in the UK, so I'm coming back every month. One of the products my kids adore is the little Kool-Aid juice things that you squirt into a glass of water.
Okay.
Little tiny things, you squirt into a glass of water. And I would tend to pick that stuff up from Target, because there's always a Target on the way to the airport. I knew where they are. I could grab them. Anyway, I've not been able to buy a single one of those reliably from a Target in the last year, because they're always out of stock, or you can't find them, or there's just a giant space where it should be. That is not acceptable in retail anywhere. It's not acceptable in a retailer like Target. And Target looks chaotic. Target, so many great ideas, so many brilliant people there being let down by, I don't want to talk badly of people, but I'm just hoping that the new guy, now he's taking over, is an insider, but maybe he's been as frustrated as the rest of us about making that change. But, fundamentally, those numbers that we presented show that it's not just people like us with a big opinion saying, oh, Target's not what it used to be. The data's there.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. Well, Richard, Rocky, I really appreciate your time today. I think it's been a great conversation. I think the data you're creating is really amazing. I think for retailers out there, I think the good news is there now is real data, real truth, I think, as you put it, that you can get access to, not just generally, but at a store level, where you really can get granular into where things are working for you and where you have an opportunity to improve and capture share and drive financial performance. So I think, it's exciting days. I think what you guys are doing is great, and I really appreciate the time today.
Thank you for giving us a chance to come talk to you, Ken. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, fantastic.
Awesome. Let me